Buddy, my name is Blake Bergstrom, and I'm a teaching pastor here, and I'm honored and humbled to be here today. I am really excited because I just got back from Africa on Tuesday, and I went to Rushuru, Uganda, with a group of about 11 people from Pointe, and we went there because there was this guy named Godwin that wants to be able to learn carpentry. He wanted to learn how to do woodworking, and so we put in a wood shop for him, and he's like, I am so very excited. I'm going to teach the children the trades just like Jesus. And so he was like grinning ear from ear, and literally we walked up after we installed the wood shop, and he was skipping. The man was skipping. And I'll tell you, that's something to celebrate big, and that was because of your sacrifices, and what we do here at Missions is unbelievable. So will you give the Missions Hand a big team for their efforts? And man, it's so cool to be a part of it. So you better buckle up because I'm fixing to get my preach on. I'm excited today. So I want to welcome everybody here at Richmond campus. I want to welcome everybody at Missouri City. I want to encourage you to go get to know Pastor Scott Denton. He's got a great heart, and he wants to help you get plugged in. So I'd go find him and get to know him. I also want to welcome all of our online listeners. It's so great to have you with us. I love that you're a part of this community here all over the world. And so, man, today is going to be a great day. I'm super excited about it. I want to make sure that you continue to have the West End campus on your mind and on your heart because, you know, having a baby is messy. And they keep you up at night. They spit up everywhere. And it's a job. It's a lot of work to have a baby, and that's true in an organization as well. We have this brand new baby campus that's requiring a lot of work, and it's hard work. But man, there's so many amazing staff here that make this church such a phenomenal place that there's so many sacrifices that happen behind the scenes like every single week around here. And so, man, especially Patrick and Lisa, they are just amazing people. Would you do me a favor and just kind of give them a little encouragement by clapping for them and let them know you love them. They're great people. I'll clap too. I love this church. Okay, that was a great applause. You crushed that. Okay, so today we're in a series called, it's really a really creative name. It's called 1 Samuel. I don't know if the creative team came up with that, but it's genius. It's a book in the Bible, and hopefully you've been reading that book. It's been a great study. I'd encourage you to go back. And more than anything, I just want to encourage you to dive into the adventure of reading the Bible. Because understanding the stories and sort of what comes out of the Bible, this beautiful historical account that was handed to us, that's like these truths from God that's like so fun to sort of learn and to grow in. And so I want to encourage you to dive in to 1 Samuel. Okay, so today we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 17 if you'd like to go there. And I just want to maybe repeat that line that was just said in the movie by the great theologian Matt Damon, and his amazing line that kind of goes through that whole thing in We Bought a Zoo. So if you don't mind, I want to say this with you. So here's what he said. Sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of, we say this, insane courage. Just literally 20 seconds of, say this, embarrassing bravery, and I promise you something great will come out of it. I want you to turn to the person beside you, and I want you to say, man, your courage is insane. Go ahead, do that. Online, let me see you do that. Missouri City, do that. Your courage is insane. All right, so today we're in one of my favorite chapters in the whole Bible, and I'm going to be telling an epic battle story that's been talked about for centuries. And you're very familiar with this story if you've been at church at all, but I'm going to pretend that none of you have ever heard this story before, okay? And I'd like to maybe remove the word story and move to a historical account of something that happened a long, long time ago between a young shepherd boy named David and a mighty warrior named Goliath. So try to kind of forget all that you know about this story and maybe look at it through a new lens. I'm going to sort of bring out some different parts of this amazing account, and I hope to be able to help you see it in a new light, and maybe God will do something amazing today. So there's these two nations, and they're in this war. And they're at this place called the Valley of Elah. And on one side, you have God's chosen people and the Israelites. And on the other side, there's this group of people known as the Philistines. So you have these two nations. They're going to fight. But instead of making everyone come together and just killing one another, it was sort of custom to just pick one of their mightiest warriors and fighters to represent each country. So it's kind of like Drago from Russia and Rocky Balboa for the USA, right? And these two are going to go at it, but it's really a fight to the death. It's not just boxing. So Goliath is referred to as a champion, and he's from a town called Gath. He's been fighting since he was a little boy. He's made a career out of killing people, and it's all he knows, and apparently he's really, really good at it. He doesn't lose since he's referred to as a champion. He was over 9 feet tall, some say 9'9", so he was heavily recruited by the NBA. And his armor was like 125 pounds, so that's like carrying a small person around. It's a lot of weight in just his armor. He had a bronze javelin, which would have been awesome. It was on his back. And he had this spear that was amazing. He had the finest weapons in the land. He was truly what I refer to as a massive freak of nature. So much so that the entire nation of Israel were scared out of their minds of this man. So in 1 Samuel 17, verse 8, it says this: Goliath stood and shouted a taunt. He was taunting them across to the Israelites. "Why are y'all coming out to fight?" he called. "I'm the Philistine champion, but you're the only servants of Saul. You're only servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of the Israel today, so send me a man who will fight me." And when Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken, scared. So who says this? I defy the armies of Israel today. So he's coming out and he's talking serious trash. And this goes on for like 40 days. And even though Goliath is strutting in front of them and talking all kinds of noise, nobody is doing anything about it for 39 days. Until one day, the 40th day, a teenager from Bethlehem who's tending his sheep is asked a favor by his dad named Jesse. He's asked to go into the battle and to bring his brothers some food. This is what Jesse says: "Take this basket of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread and carry them quickly to your brothers." And so he leaves. He runs to his brothers, and he's got one job, and that's to go bring them some food and then come back and give him a report about how things are going, how they're getting along. So that's all he was supposed to do, right? So the next morning, David gets up. He makes the journey from Bethlehem to the Valley of Elah, which was about a 15-mile walk, by the way, which wouldn't have been very far for a shepherd to take his sheep. So he's doing this 15-mile walk in the morning. When he arrived, he was getting there just as the army was sort of doing some war cries, you know. So think Spartan warriors, ooh, 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 right? They're doing that, and then they're going to the battlefield. So he walks up, he sees that going on, and then it happened. David, it says in the Bible, David heard Goliath. And so Goliath is doing his normal ritual he's been doing for 39 days, and on this 40th day, it's no different. He's making fun of the Israelites. He's making fun of their God. And David walks up, and he's like, "What the what? Like, you guys hearing what I'm hearing? Oh no, he did not do that." He's not saying that, is he? Like, he gets immediately offended. He's like, something's going to change up in here. And the crazy thing is, he's looking around at all of his warriors, right? Navy SEALs, Green Berets. And he's looking at them. He's like, what's going on? And they're all like terrified and deeply shaken right? They're freaking out and scared of this guy. And some of the soldiers, they walk up to him and they tell him, like, I got to tell you about this reward. Have you heard about the reward? And so this is in the Bible. They walk him to like, man, I don't know if you heard, but Saul, King Saul, if you kill Goliath, he's going to give you one of his girls. You can marry. And they're pretty, real pretty. And not just that, but like your whole family will be exempt from taxes. And so he's looking around like, are we talking about girls and taxes? I don't know if you heard what he said, but he defied our God, the living God. And my brothers are in this army, and he talked trash about my brothers. You can say stuff about me, but now we got some issues. It's over. We're going to roll, right? So little David, he's probably 12 to 14 years old. He's walking up amongst the Green Berets, and he's looking at them going, why aren't you guys doing anything? Now, I would have, he wants to defend his older brothers. And I get that. I am the oldest in my family, and I have two younger brothers. And being the oldest, it was my job, it was my responsibility to beat the snot out of my younger brothers. And so I had to help them become tough as nails, right? And so my youngest brother, he was a wimp. And so I had to work on that for years and years. And he's in counseling. There's a lot wrong with him, but I was ruthless, and I think I messed him up a little. He's got anger issues, like for real, and he also has a chip on his shoulder. But here's the deal. He doesn't take crap from anybody, and I think that's because of me, and I'm grateful I did that. So little brothers, he comes up, and he's got a chip on his shoulder, right? So real fast, raise your hand if you're a little brother. Go ahead, raise your hand. I'm sorry for what we did to you. I apologize. It's not right. And I openly admit something today. I'm going to say this out loud. I think my little brother can whip my rear now. Now, Brett, if you're watching this is just a dumb illustration. I'm kidding. You know I can whip you. But really, I'm scared of him. He's gotten really tough, and he's got that look in his eyes, like he kind of turns his head, and he looks at you like, you want to do this? And these days I'm like, no, I don't. Do not. I'm scared of you. So here's young David coming up, and there's 8 boys. He's number 8. So he's the runt, and Eliab is the oldest. And so when Eliab hears that David's there and he's running his mouth, here's what Eliab does. He walks up. When David's oldest brother Eliab heard David talking to the men, he was angry. And he asked a great question if you're the oldest brother. What are you doing here? It's a good question. Like, you're not supposed to be here. You know better. He demanded. What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? You know you're worthless. You need to get back to the sheep. You got a meaningless job. Get out of here. I'm important. You're not. It's good quality oldest brother statement. I approve. And then he says, I know about your pride and deceit. That's a little strong. I know about your pride and deceit. You just want to see the battle. So David's like, hey, what have I done now? Heard that 1,000 times. David replied, I was only asking a question, right? So then he's like, forget you, Eliab. He walked away over to some other guys, and he asked them the same thing and received the same answer. Then David's question was reported to King Saul. Great. And the king sent for him. Wonderful. So now, little David is walking around, running his mouth, and the king himself says, wait, what's he saying? Bring him here. And so if I'm the oldest brother here and I'm in charge of little David, I'm ticked. I'm really, really mad. And I'd be like, dude, you need to shut your face. Because now Saul wants to talk to you, and he's a busy man, and he doesn't need you up in his business. But it's too late. David ran his mouth, and now he's being brought before King Saul. And it's beyond Eliab's control. Like, he can't do anything about it now, but I promise Eliab was ready to beat the smack out of him in a spiritual way, in a loving way. And I get that. I get it. He didn't want to have to tell his dad, serious, like, this isn't going to go well for you, Dave. Like, you're going to die, and I'm going to get to go. The oldest knows, like, what it's going to happen after everything, like, plays out the worst case scenario. And so he's like, I'm going to get to tell Dad about your death. And then I didn't defend you. This is going to be great. Not only that, but when you die, it's going to disgrace our entire family name. And we'll be known forever for the family that had this son named David that died because he tried to fight Goliath. Like this, there's too much at stake, too much on the line. You're not doing this. Eliab made David feel like he's nothing but a worthless shepherd. That's what he did effectively. But I'd like to talk about that for a little bit, okay? So what's it mean that he was a shepherd boy? See, David, he'd spent his entire life tending to the needs of sheep. And sheep are really simple creatures. They're very dumb, and they don't do what they're supposed to, and they stink. But they're like little animals. They're very fickle. And he had spent his whole life feeding them and finding green pasture and helping them find water and helping deliver baby lambs. This was his life, helping them when they're wounded or when they get lost, right? And more than anything else, the best shepherds out there are the ones that are exceptionally good at listening. Listening beyond the sounds and hearing the movement and knowing if there's something in the camp. He would listen to their sounds, and they knew his voice. David's voice would have been the whole flock's comfort, and David's number one job was to protect them. See, he had spent his whole life protecting. Just imagine 9, 10, he's 11 years old, just a little boy out in a field. He's gone far away from home, which was normal, and he's sleeping in that field with his sheep under the stars, and he's probably scared out of his mind, terrified that some predator is going to break in and take one of his sheep. And so he understood what fear was. He had felt lurking danger at every moment. He had those moments when you wake up at night and you're scared out of your mind. Has that ever happened to you in here? Like, you think somebody's in your house and you're like, every sound you hear, like your heartbeat, you hear everything, like this heightened sense of awareness, your hair standing up on your skin and you're freaked out. And how many of you men have walked around the house in whitey-tighties ready to pounce on somebody? Yeah, okay. You don't have to raise your hand, but I know every one of you have. And so that's the kind of moments that David's lived his whole life. Not in whitey-tighties, but he's been scared out of his mind, not knowing what was in the camp. And he didn't have the comfort of a home. He's just away out in the field. And so for him, watching and listening for a predator was second nature. And do you know what he had to defend himself? It wasn't a 30-06 like amazing rifle. He had a rock and a sling, and he had a stick. It's called the staff. That's all he had. And so he's out there sort of defenseless, and all he really had was his God. That's it. And so all day, every day, this little boy had been going through real trials, challenges, alone. And he spent his time just praying. And that's why this man is referred to as a man after God's own heart later in the scriptures. He spent all of his time with God. Listen, God was all David had and all that he wanted. That was it. He was just out in the field praying all the time, spending time with him. Remember, he's the one that coined the term in Psalm 27:4 when he said, one thing I ask from the Lord. This only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. That's what he wanted. I just want to be in the house of God, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple. I also want to remind you, it's the same young man that penned the amazing psalmist in Psalm 23, that's David, and he said these words, and it might have been during this season of life, when he was a young man, writing this down to try to reassure himself, right? It's the Lord is my shepherd, Psalm 23. Lord is my shepherd, and what does that say? I lack nothing, nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake, not my name. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, what does this say? I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, you're going to trip. Well, I was in Africa. I was talking to this little man named Barnabas. And Barnabas, he was like one of the main leaders in the church. And we're walking along, and we're on his property. And his property had a hole in it like this big. And there, we walked past that, and he didn't say anything. And then we get closer to his house, and he said, do you remember seeing the hole back there? And we were all like, yeah. We were scared to death of it. He goes, there is a python that lives in there that is so big that it eats my goats. And we were like, what? We walked right beside it. It was like 3 feet away. I don't like that. And we were all like, it's starting to get dark, like, so is he around here? and he goes, do not worry. He comes out at 10 o'clock. And we're like, well, it's 8:30. Like, we're done here. And so we were walking along, and Barnabas, I was like, have you ever seen lions here? He was telling us that they're gone. They're no longer in that part of the country. And he said, but my grandfather, he was a shepherd. And one day, a lion came into the camp, and he chased it down, grabbed it by its leg, and beat it with a stick until it was dead. And I said, dude, are you messing with me? And you don't understand, he's like, so humble, and he doesn't have any idea how to lie. He's like, Pastor Blake, I do not lie. I was like, okay, but seriously, he grabbed the back leg. I was like going, come on. And he beat it with a stick, and he's like, yes. And I said, well, did he cut him up, like scratch him and stuff? And he said, yes, he scratched his front and his back, but he took the stick and hit it until it was dead. And I was like, that's amazing. I've never heard anybody catch a lion and kill it with a stick. That's stupid awesome. And so for the very first time in my life, I understood this passage. Like, oh, man, if I was around a guy like that, his rod and his staff would comfort me, right? And it was like, oh, gosh, I've never really thought of that like that, but that makes sense to me now. And so I remember just thinking, wow, this is sort of like this country, this land is probably a lot like what it was like for David. It was just north of there where we were at in Uganda. And I remember just going, it was probably like this. But David, understand, when he walks up to Saul, right? This is what happens. He walks up, he's like this little runt of a boy, and he's been running his mouth, and finally they bring him up to King Saul. And remember, he's like 13, 14, his voice is probably changing, right? And so he walks up to King Saul, and here's what happens. He says, don't worry about the Philistine. I'll go fight him. And so just imagine, he's just a little kid. And Saul is like, don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy. And he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted, because that's who David is. And I've been taking care, this is what he says, I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. And when a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. Saul. And he says, if the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw. Yeah. And I club it to death. Whatever. I've done this to both lions and bears. Yeah, me too. And I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too. I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right. Go ahead. And may the Lord be with you. I was like, God bless you, buddy. And then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail. I don't think that's the right word. David put it on, strapped the sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. I can't go in these. Sorry. He protested to Saul, I'm not used to them. So David took them off again. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into his shepherd's bag. And then, armed only with his shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. I feel like right there in this passage, I hear the Rocky Balboa theme, like, dun, 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 dun. Like, watch out, sucker, he's got some rocks, right? So he puts them in his pouch and he starts to walk across the valley. I love that David, he said no to the king. Nobody does that. It didn't matter who he was with or who was talking to him. He wasn't going to do something or act a certain way just because he was in the presence of somebody that was great in the eyes of men. And I'd like to say something to you. Sometimes the best way that we learn who you are is to know who you aren't. And that's what David knew. He's like, this isn't me, man. I'm not going to fight in this clunky armor. When we're going into battle and it's serious and your life is on the line, all of a sudden, man, it doesn't really matter what anybody thinks. And all you're thinking about is, man, listen, that's great for you, Saul. That's the way you want to fight. But if I'm going to die, I'm going to die swinging the best way that I know how in this body. So the takeaway for me is that David, he did David, right? You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't trying to be anybody but himself. And I think some of us need to hear that today. Some of you in this room or online or Missouri City, you need to know, listen, you do you. You do you because nobody else can. So you do you because that's what the world needs. It doesn't need you trying to be somebody else. You be you, especially if you're walking in the giftedness that God's given you. I also think that it's funny that King Saul, who's the head and shoulders above the rest of everyone in the land, he has the finest armor and the most money, and he's like, I'm not fighting him, but God bless you, buddy, and you know what? You should wear my armor because that's what you need to do, right? So anybody have a friend like Saul that's like, when it comes down to it and they're only thinking of themselves and they're not going to risk or sacrifice and they won't lift a finger or give you any time, but they always have a word of advice. I just love people like that. So David, he worked hard to silence all the noise and the voices and the chatter. He used the humble weapons and giftings that he had been given by God, and he started his way to the valley of the shadow of death. And here's what happened. Goliath walked out towards David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at this ruddy-faced boy. "Am I a dog," he roared, "that you come at me with a stick?" And he cursed David by the names of his gods. "Am I a dog?" Now, as David was getting closer, you know, he's a little guy. He's looking up at this 9-foot-tall man. It's not in the Bible, but I'm pretty certain he tinkled himself a little bit. And so he's scared. He's human, right? And I'm sure he doesn't know how it's going to turn out. He's trusting God. He didn't know what was going to happen. And so he's just going forward, right? He was doing what God told him to do. And this was his moment. This was the 20 seconds of embarrassing bravery. This is it. This is the insane courage. Really, everyone around him was mocking him. And this is like, it really was embarrassing bravery. Like, the army's laughing at him. All the people he looked up to. His brothers are making fun of him. They're telling him he's going to die. Saul, like, you're just a boy. You're a shepherd. Like, what are you doing? Like, the king himself, everyone is telling him this isn't going to work. But David, he's working hard to silence the voices. And he's like, listen, man, I got to hear the voice of God right now because it's all I have. Listen, it's really easy for all of us to focus on how large our giant is. And everyone in this room and online at Missouri City, we all have something we're up against. If it wasn't yesterday, it's not today, it's coming tomorrow. We're all up against something really, really big. And if I'm honest with you, I'm embarrassed at how much I think about the giants that I face in my life. I can be crippled by anxiety when I think about some of them. So what is it for you? What's your giant? Is it lust? Is it bad health? Is it a broken relationship? Is it finances? For my mom, she faced polio her whole life, and it made her feel like she was crippled. And for you, maybe it's something that is as equally as crippling. What is it that you just don't think is possible to overcome? When we were in Africa, Pastor Gerald said, our greatest giant is poverty, and it's poverty of the mind. We all act like we don't have anything, but when we have Jesus, we have everything. Maybe for you, it's something that's really got you completely. It's all you're thinking about. All you're thinking about is the giant that's in the room, and you're obsessed with where that giant's at, and you're focused on that giant all the time. Listen, we all perceive our giants as extremely large. But we cannot forget that we know who's really in charge. Somebody say amen. That's true, you know. And that's what made David walk into this battle with great confidence. Let me show you what happened. So David replied to the Philistine. I love this. So he hears this giant man say, "You're a stick, my dog." And then David, little guy, says, "You come to me with the sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you," just screaming out across the valley. His brothers are hearing this little guy say this. "I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. And today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you, cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescued his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle." Come on, somebody. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. And as Goliath moved closer to attack, David took off running. He's smoking. Woo! out to me, and he's reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out his stone. He's, oh, sucker, this is hot pursuit. He hurled with his sling and hit the Philistine in the head. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone, for he had no sword. Then David ran over and pulled Goliath's sword from its sheath. David used it to kill him and cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they turned and they ran. What an amazing account that happened in history. You know what I love about little David? How many of us actually tell our giants what's going to happen to them? In your life, do you tell your giant what's going to happen to them? I love that this ruddy little fella straight up tells him what's going to happen before it ever happened. Not just that, but man, he ran towards the giant. When there's a conflict in a room, I think many of us, we have a tendency to avoid it, to sort of ignore it, and maybe to act like everything's just fine, right? But he looks his giant square in the eyes, and he runs directly towards it. See, if we know that the battle belongs to God, and in the end, the Lord wins the final victory, then let's start treating our battles, our trials, and our giants the way that they should be treated. When we look at it like that, all of a sudden, it's not David who's the underdog. It was always Goliath who didn't stand a chance. In this passage, there's 9 references to God, and there's 2 references to Goliath. David had his mind on one thing when he was writing this: his all-powerful God, who is in control of all things and completely in charge. He had a 9-to-2 ratio when it came to worrying about the giant versus how much he was depending on his God. If we focus on giants, we will fall. But if we focus on God, our giants fall. My prayer for us is that we would be a people who stand in the gap to help giants fall, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. That we would help have mighty faith in God, and that we'd have this insane courage and embarrassing bravery when we face our greatest challenges. Because in a world that's filled with so much doubt, insecurity, fear, and despair, and in the political agendas of our day, and all the tyranny and the fighting and the wars and the anger and the bitterness and hatred, it's important for us to remember that we serve a mighty God that is sovereign. He is in control. And even though our giants may look incredibly large, our God is in charge. He is in charge of your life today in this moment. Would you guys pray with me? Father God, we just thank you so much for reminding us today that we can trust you. We're sorry, God, that we go and fight our battles without you. We often don't even think about you. When we're facing our stress and our job load and our kids and our addictions, and God, we had so many battles that you know of. And we're sorry, God, that we try to do it on our own power and our own strength. Please forgive us. But God, today we want to lean on you, our great shepherd, who will lead us into green pastures beside still waters. You restore our souls. So, Father, thank you for letting us know that your rod and your staff comfort us individually. It comforts our families. It comforts our community. It comforts our nation. And you comfort your children all around the world. Father, help us to listen to your voice. We are your sheep, and you're our shepherd. And all of us just want to hear from you, God. So help us to become more attentive, more present, into longing for you, to wanting one thing, and that's to desire you more and more and more. Because really, just like David, you're all we have, and you're all we really want. So God, we love you. It's in your precious and holy name we pray. Everybody said, amen.